interview with Earl King, Korean War veteran.
Correct.
We'll start off by asking a couple questions.
Okay, so why did you decide to join the service? Or were you drafted?
No, I was not drafted. I volunteered. I was 17 years old at the time. And I went through the basic training and so forth, and this was during the Korean War. But I wasn't drafted, I joined.
Where'd you do your basic training?
Say again?
Where'd you service your basic training?
Camp in South Carolina. Camp
Lejeune.
Lejeune, yeah, right, yeah, Camp Lejeune, South Carolina.
Do you have any stories from your basic training? Any particular?
Stories, well, no, other than it was pretty tough. It's quite a shock to a young man going in there.
Yeah.
When you get off the bus and then the next stop, they cut all your hair off and give you your clothes and so forth. But I think it was the best training in the world.
Excellent. Yeah. And you were in high school prior to this, correct?
No, I was out of school.
Okay.
I was out of school. I was working a full-time job to help support the family.
Right.
And when my mother remarried, it was time for me to get out of the house.
Now you said you were 17 when you joined up. Was that an age discrepancy going in, or?
Into Korea?
Yeah.
Yes, it was. So when I got out of basic training, I went to San Francisco and boarded a ship, and I wound up on Kwajalein in the Marshall Islands until I was 18 years old. And then I could get into Korea.
So they made you wait?
Yeah, absolutely correct.
What was your military occupational specialty? Your job?
Well, in the Marshall Islands, I became a corporal, and when I got to Korea, I had a government driver's license too that I picked up in the Marshall Islands. And when I flew from Kwajalein to Guam to Okinawa to Japan, and then from Japan to Korea. And when I got there, it was right after the ceasefire. And I joined, we were north of Seoul, Korea, and I became a squad leader there. And having a government driver's license, believe it or not, I used to drive the company commander from one place to another. And from time to time back to Seoul and in the Jeep. And I can remember taking him down to Seoul from the Jeep and waiting for him. I'm sitting in the Jeep, and I was approached by some kids that want to know if I wanted to buy some liquor. And he wrapped it up and put it underneath the company commander's seat and drove back to our base. He never knew it was there. But did you want me to continue on that?
No, that's all right. We can move on. We'll ask some Korean War specific questions now.
Okay.
Actually about Korea. Do you feel that the Korean War was pretty much the forgotten war? So to speak?
Yeah, I do feel that pretty much. We lost an awful lot of people over there, and it was really rough going. But coming home from there, to me, it was a war that, of course, they called it a conflict at that time.
Right.
And there was no big fanfare when we came back. Well, I should take that back, because when I finally did come home, we boarded ship in Seoul, Korea, and to a 5-ship convoy, and we didn't know if we were going to go to Indochina at that time. And it wound up that we didn't. We were 28 days coming across the Pacific into San Diego. And when we got to San Diego, well, they made an announcement aboard the ship. Anybody that had any weapons or souvenirs of the war, you better throw them overboard now because they're going to search us. They never did that. But in any case, we got to a ballpark, and the mayor of the city was there, and because I was a Marine, and he welcomed us and gave us the key to the city, but he asked us to leave the city there. And when we left the ballpark, we marched down through the main street of San Diego, California. A ticker tape parade. I couldn't believe it. The streets were lined in ticker tape parade, and we boarded buses that took us up to Camp Pendleton, California. And it's the first time that I had milk, bread, cottage cheese, and a lot of foods, because I was overseas for 2 years.
Yep.
And we didn't have those real things over there. And it was shortly after that, just maybe 3 months, that I was discharged back.
Since you didn't have that type of nourishment, what did you eat while you were over there?
Sea rations, we called them sea rations at that time. And a lot of times with the ceasefire and back away from the DMZ zone, we did have a mess hall, but a lot of times it was sea rations. And we did a lot of washing, cooking, and everything in our helmets in those times. And while I was there, my squad was chosen to patrol the DMZ, which we did do. That was the DMZ is the space between North Korea and South Korea. And we did patrol it, and I came upon 2 people at one time with my squad, and I had the necessary radios on me, and the man was trying to convince us that we should have sex with the woman. And I knew better than that, because back in those days, they were after GIs to have sex with a woman who was infected with venereal disease. And if he came down with venereal disease and so forth, that would take out a gun emplacement here and there along the line, which would weaken the line of defense. But then I called for the CIC, as they call it in those days. So I made them both strip right down naked and called the CIC. It's like the investigators, and they come up and took them away. But then I was positioned on a hill 495 overlooking the Imjim River. And there's 2 bridges across the Imjim River. There's the Liberty Bridge and the Freedom Bridge, and they were spaced far apart. And it was just my squad up there. We had 2 50 caliber machine gun emplacements and some 30 caliber. And our job, our troops that were across that river, and in the events that the North Koreans came across again after us, was to protect our troops coming across the bridge and to knock out the bridge so they couldn't get across. And a lot of our troops on that side of the bridge at that time had air mattresses that they could float across if the bridge was out. And while we were up there, this is on they call it Hill 495, helicopter would fly us in food and water every week. And in our tent at nighttime, one night we had somebody open fire upon us, and but the shots that came through the tent were high because our silhouettes were high inside from the light, and nobody was injured. And we went out and we tried to hunt them down, and we never could find them. And I think they wanted us lead us into a minefield. And of course, we called for backup and so forth, and but we never did find them. We didn't find them. And this was after the ceasefire.
So, how cold was it in Korea? Was it really that cold?
Cold.
And just weather,
It
general weather, and
It was very, very cold. When we were on patrolling the DMZ zone, our Navy corpsman, we'd ask the doc, we call him Doc, for some codeine. And he'd give us each a shot of codeine, which just warmed us up inside and so forth, and walked the DMZ. And because we were quite close to him. And we wore what they called Mickey Mouse boots. And you could walk in those Mickey Mouse boots and be fairly comfortable, but your feet would sweat a lot. And if you stood still for any length of time, your feet would get cold.
yeah.
And it was very muddy in the spring. It was, but we were fortunately, they never did try to come through again. But
Yeah.
Explain to us what you thought you were fighting for in Korea, if you think your efforts were worth it.
Well, I think our efforts were worth it. There were an awful lot of people killed. And I was doing what my country asked me to do. And we're still there today. They're still there today protecting the DMZ.
It's still Marines too, isn't it?
All the Marines in the Army and so forth. I know that my brother, after I was discharged from the Marines and my brother joined the Army, he got stationed over there. And they had Quonset huts. We had tents.
Yeah.
We had tents with liners, and we had mummy bags that we slept in the tent, and you weren't allowed to have any heat on in the tent at nighttime. But in the morning, we had stoves in there that were oil fired, and we took turns. The first one awake in the morning would light the stove, and me being the squad leader, I made sure everybody took a turn.
Yeah.
But it is quite primitive. And we had a horse in our outfit, and the horse used to carry a lot of heavy equipment up the hills because Korea is very hilly.
Yeah.
Hills in the mountains and so forth.
Not many areas had the horses.
No, there
Fortunate
was
to have.
there was throughout the history of Korea and the Korean War, there was a limited number of the horses, and some of those horses were decorated and so forth.
Do you feel that you guys were always, supplied correctly? You guys had the right equipment when you needed it, or was it, something where there's always a lack of something, or?
No, we were pretty much supplied of our sea rations and so forth that were needed, and we gave each other haircuts and things like that there, and shaved when we could, but not always able to do so. And our clothing, as far as cleaning, was that we would gather up our clothes, and with my company vehicle, with the company commander, we would drop our clothes off at a river where some of the Koreans were there, and they would wash the clothes in the river and beat them on the rocks. And that's how they got washed.
All right. Excellent. I think that'll wrap it up. Thank you very much.
Okay, that was easy.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.